Hello to everybody at home and welcome to today's Screenside Chat with CWD. My name is Kerri Sparling and I am CWD's Editorial Director, and I will be your host for this afternoon. And we're working on kind of a little intro script, so I'm trying it out today. And part of it involves letting people know who are not as familiar with the organization that Children with Diabetes is a nonprofit organization that has been serving families with diabetes since 1995. We run programs throughout the year, including these awesome Screenside Chats and our Friends for Life conferences. And we would love to have you join us for future events, including our Moffle Mom Happy Hours. We'll more on that in the chat in just a minute. Our Friends for Life Winter Conference, which is taking place December 4th through the 6th. And we're looking forward to Friends for Life Orlando next year, hopefully in Orlando for 2021. So to learn more about giving and supporting programs like Friends for Life and our Screenside Chats, please check out cwd.is/give. And I am so excited to both be done with reading that script and also to welcome our guest today, who is Kim Rose, and she is joining us from Florida. I just want to make sure that you can, oh, Kim, you're still muted. Feel free to unmute. Let's do it. Awesome. I'm so glad that you were here today, and to make things just the teeniest bit more awkward, I'm going to read your bio while you're sitting here. Sure. So we'll see how that goes. So Kim Rose, we're so happy to have you here today. Kim is a Florida-based registered dietitian and nutritionist who specializes in health and wellness concerns for people with diabetes. Her inclusive approach and philosophy revolve around making nutrition easy and attainable. Thank you for doing that. Kim does this by addressing common and complex food and wellness topics for the general public and health professionals alike on her YouTube channel, and contributing to multiple media outlets, including Healthline, HuffPost, and Health Magazine, just to name a few. Kim has close to a decade of professional experience and dedicates her time to working at the hospital and counseling clients in her private practice. In her spare time, Kim likes to run, podcast, and enjoy a large bowl of kettle corn. And I will co-sign that right there with you. So Kim, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, this is going to be great. And I'm so glad, because I love the idea of making food feel less overwhelming for people with diabetes. It's such an overarching theme for what we're living with, day to day. So, I mean, I know I've just read your bio, but did you want to give a brief introduction for yourself, just by way of saying hi to everybody who may not know you?
Sure. So hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you guys for coming on and listening to what I have to say about making food make sense. Disclaimer, I'm originally from Jamaica. So if you hear like a slight accent come out sometimes, an accent does come out when I get excited. And of course, diabetes is my topic that excites me the most. That's the accent that you're hearing. A lot of my patients and clients would say, "Oh, are you from New York?" And I'm like, "No, much further down south. I'm from Jamaica originally." So that's the accent that you guys are hearing, just so that you guys can know a little bit more about me.
Well, I hope we hear it, because if you said that means that you're excited about what you're talking about, I hope we hear a lot of it. So, and just to sort of jump right in. So I mean, you've been, it says that you've been a dietitian and working in this field for over 10 years. So what made you want to get started in working with people who have diabetes?
Sure. So there's actually a lot of my family members that have diabetes, particularly type 2 diabetes. And I have seen them get amputations, end up with a lot of unnecessary health problems, and eventually death. And, I always thought to myself, well, how can this be avoided? And I realized that food and nutrition was definitely the way to go, because growing up in a traditional Jamaican household, I was taught that you're going to be a doctor, a nurse, or an engineer. I did not know anything about a dietitian. And when I told my parents, I wanted to go to school to become a dietitian, nutritionist, they're like, "A diet what? Diet who? Like who is that? What does that do? Are you going to be able to find a job?" That was their main question. So, I realized that this was something that was not really well known in my culture. And I decided, what, I'm going to break cultural norms. I'm going to break away from the traditional career paths, and I'm going to do something, because, something that I like to say a lot, and I say this a lot to my clients and my patients, is one thing that everyone on this planet has in common is we have to eat in order to survive. And for us to know what foods may be more nutrient dense or what foods may be more appropriate for our systems is something that's important. So that's why I decided to, let's make nutrition easy. It doesn't have to be complicated, because I remember seeing my family members and they would tell me, "Well, the doctor said I can't have this and I can't have that." And when I would question, "Well, why is it?" they just didn't know. So I said, you know, let's take out the frustrations, let's take out the difficulty from that, and let's get down to the nitty gritty, and let's eat for health and for strength.
I love that. And I think that that is so important, especially for our community as we're trying to figure out what foods we want to be taking into our bodies. And it's really important to know why we want those foods. So I like that you are helping pull back some of the complexity and making thinking about food a lot easier. And so just in terms of addressing some of the folks that are in the chat room, for those of you listening at home, please, if you have questions for Kim, please leave them in the chat. We can address them as we go. We can address them at the end, whatever works, for the flow of the conversation. But this is a great place to get some of those questions that you've been noodling around up in your head out to an expert. So make sure you're asking questions right in the chat room whenever they come up. But Kim, to sort of jump right in, are you okay if I start with our first formal question?
Let's do it.
All right, cool. So there's a lot of talk about fats and healthy fats and unhealthy fats, and there can be some confusion around that. So just to sort of kick things off, what are some examples of healthy fats that people can have in their diets?
I'm so glad that you started with this question, because fats in general, fats as a whole, are classified as being bad, and there's no such thing as a bad food. Food does not have a higher capability of thinking to be able to label themselves as being good or bad. And there are countless examples of how fat can be beneficial for the body. So the good types of fats are fats that can be categorized into PUFAs and MUFAs. So that's PUFA and MUFA. And Kerri, I already see your face, but the nerd in me, I'm going to break down everything for you. I'm going to go ahead and break it down. So PUFAs actually stand for polyunsaturated fatty acids, and these are such things as they're in foods such as walnuts and eggs, salmon and herring and sardines and chia seeds and flax seeds, just to name a few. And what PUFAs actually do, it actually helps to lower the cholesterol. So it actually helps to protect your heart health. And it also reduces inflammation for someone that is very sick. So for instance, I actually work in a hospital setting, and I'm seeing a lot of patients that have COVID-19 and they also have diabetes. So I'm making sure that I'm providing a lot of polyunsaturated fats in the form of fish, in the form of eggs, in the form of walnuts onto their diet, so that it can help their overall immune system. The other type of fat is MUFAs, the monounsaturated fatty acids. And these actually help to increase our good cholesterol. When people think of cholesterol, they think of it in terms that, oh, it's bad, it's going to block my arteries. But this type of cholesterol actually has heart health benefits. So the $64 million question is, well, where can we find this good cholesterol? It's actually found in your avocados, in your peanut butters, as well as your vegetable oils. And the bad fats are saturated fats. So these saturated fats come from four-legged creatures, such as your cow or your beef, for instance. So basically, something that I like to tell all my clients and patients is, let's swap out the saturated fats and let's replace them with fish, with peanut butter, with avocado, with walnuts and chia seeds and flax seeds, so that we're getting some of those heart health benefits. Because to be honest with you, for individuals that do have diabetes, diabetes is not just simply isolated. It impacts the whole entire body. It impacts the heart. It impacts the other organs, such as your eyes. It can impact your kidneys. So we want to make sure that we are holistically on top of our health.
I mean, I love the information. And then also, as a total sidebar, my kid is getting a hamster tomorrow, and she's been thinking up hamster names. And I'm definitely suggesting Mufa or Poofa as a potential hamster name. Just throwing that out there as a thing. We actually have a question coming in from the chat. So I'm going to split from our list for just a hot second and read this one out to you. We have someone in the chat who's saying that they are very overwhelmed with food. They have a 4-year-old daughter who was diagnosed with T1D in August, and last week was diagnosed with celiac disease. And so, Kim, what advice would you have for such a young kid with so many food restrictions?
And this is a very great question, because honestly, with type 1 diabetes, there's a lot of autoimmune diseases that can occur as well, such as celiac disease. So what I would say for this person that's asking this question, it's really about a mind shift change. So instead of focusing on, no, you can't have this, no, you can't have that, let us stock the home with what foods that this particular child is able to have, and say, well, honey, here's your options, and mommy and daddy and your siblings are going to eat these options as well, because it all starts in the mind. It's a whole entire mindset. Instead of of focusing on what they can't have in regards to their restrictions, let's focus on what they can have and make food fun, especially for a child. A child does not want a food that has a carbohydrate, a starch, and a protein, and it looks boring. Cut it out in cute little shapes, making sure that they have, they can play with their food and that they're able to enjoy it. So I would definitely say for the young child, making food fun, and let's focusing on the positive instead of the negatives.
I love that. And making food cute and fun to play with too is such a nice idea. And kind of in keeping with that, sometimes when we look at our foods, we categorize them as good or bad. And I liked at the opening that you had said that food doesn't have the mindset to assign itself as good or bad, which I really love, but some people are still coming in hot with that kind of ideology. And so a lot of times people with diabetes may be told that eating fruit is bad, that something sweet like that is very dangerous for them. So what's your take on fruits for people with diabetes?
Oh, this is the question. I'm getting excited. I'm
ready for the accent.
I'm trying to suppress it. I'm trying to come out. So I have met a lot of people who avoid fruit, but we have to remember, yes, truth be told, fruit does have some sugar in it. But fruit also has different vitamins and different minerals and different nutrients in it as well that the body needs for repair, for growth, for normal functioning. For instance, I live in Florida, if you guys didn't know that already, and orange season is coming around. And oranges, not only do they taste sweet, but they're high in vitamin C, which basically helps to delay any type of wound healing. It helps to prevent dry skin. And also there's bananas. And bananas, truth be told, they're sweet, but they're a good source of potassium, which is heart healthy as well. So, now I do want to clarify something. So there are fruits that are sweeter than others. Like you have your mangoes, you have your pineapples, and you have your bananas. And they actually pack a lot more sugar than your tartar fruits, like your strawberries, your blueberries, and your raspberries, for instance. And I would really recommend, we want to incorporate these fruits into our diet, unless there's a legitimate food allergy or food sensitivity. So as a general rule, this is what I say. If you have like a round fruit, like an apple or an orange or a pear, you want to make sure that the portion size is the size of a tennis ball. If you're having a fruit that is able to be measured using a measuring cup, like the one you see here, like for instance, those fruits that you can measure with the measuring cup are your berries and your grapes and your melon, then you want to make sure that your serving size is 1 cup. And for bananas are neither round nor can they be measured by a measuring cup. The standard size banana that you would find at your grocery stores. So the actual serving size is 1/2 of this banana. So I would definitely recommend getting fruits, but we also need to be aware of the portion sizes.
Is there a way that you would recommend people reminding themselves of what serving size is? Do you have any kind of tricks that would help people, what the size of a tennis ball is good sort of mindset to have when you're looking at different foods? Do you have any other tricks up your sleeve in that way?
Yes, to use the palm of your hand. Use the palm of your hand. So what I would say with the portion of fruits, to make sure that they fit in the palm of your hand. And the best, because everyone's palm is a little different. So I would say if you have a partner at home or if you have a adult female living with you, it's the size of their palm, because women's hands are a little bit smaller than a man's. So that is the best way, because I'm pretty sure we're not all going to walk around with measuring cups in our purses or in our pockets. So you can definitely eye things using the palm of your hand.
Oh, sometimes I'm hungry enough for a husband-sized palm of hand thing, but I will try more to use my own, but that's good advice. And then like when it comes to just sort of running around and grazing, especially now that a lot of people are home more often than they were before, we're dealing with the pandemic. So people are making foods and eating snacks at home. A lot of our families, children with diabetes, are dealing with diabetes in both adults and in their kids. And it's always tricky to think of snacks. And so when you're in grazing mode, what would you recommend for people who are looking to get a little snacky without going totally off the rails?
So I would highly recommend getting a low carb or a even carbohydrate free snack, especially if you're in gun ho snack mode. And the reason why I say that, I remember the other day I was working from home. I was actually seeing patients electronically, but now I'm back at the hospital. That's another story for another time. But I just felt like, okay, am I hungry? Am I full? Am I bored? And, this is what the COVID-19 does to us. We're indoors a lot more. We're stressed. We're listening to the news. We're seeing the cases go up, and it puts a lot of stress on the body. So there are some times when, we make a snack, and I would say ideally a snack should contain a fat, a protein, and a carbohydrate. So from what we viewed earlier, a fat comes in the form of those avocados. It comes in the form of the peanut butter, the plant oils. It comes in the form of any type of nuts that we may consume. And a fat actually is beneficial because it slows down how quickly our bodies actually absorb the sugar from the foods that we eat. Additionally, fats help with hormone production, and it also helps us to absorb certain vitamins. So we need a fat in our diet for a snack, and we also need a protein. And the protein comes in the form of the eggs or the fish or the chicken, things of that nature. And then also we need a carbohydrate. So carbohydrates are found in such foods as bread and rice and crackers. And these actually are our body's preferred source of energy. So I would say definitely for a snack to have these three factors. But if you're someone that you think, today's an emotional day for me and I want to graze all day because, you may be an emotional eater, hey, that's a-okay as well. Something that I always tell my clients is honor your hunger, but also make informed food choices as well. Something that is not going to abruptly disturb your blood sugars. And I would say with that, then that's the times that you want to have just the fat and just the protein. And additionally as well, something that should be noted is whether you are a male or female, whether you're an athlete or even a little child, your snack sizes may be a little different as well. So there's really no general, this is the snack that you should adhere to, but making sure that it's composed of a fat, a protein, and a carbohydrate is the best thing to do.
And that's some of that stuff, especially since we are home so often and things are getting a little overwhelming in certain times. It can be easy to lose sight on the nutritional stuff that you once thought of regularly, or just it was easy to think in terms of, oh, well, that just doesn't feel overwhelming or stressful. Food has become stressful for a lot of people, especially in the last couple of months. And so as we're kind of reviewing things that we wish people knew, like serving sizes and snack ideas, what are some like food related, nutrition related things that you just wish that people either knew already or would remember?
Okay, so I have a few of them.
Okay.
And forgive me guys from being verbose. I just tend to be a verbose person because there's so many important factors, but I'm going to organize them on what I see the most and what I think is the most important. The first one is don't skip meals.
Okay.
Please, if there's anything that you're taking away from today, is do not skip meals. And the reason for that is you open up yourself to having really, really low blood sugars and causing yourself to have a blood sugar crash. So in the event that you're skipping meals for any type of religious reasons, you definitely do want to monitor your blood sugars to make sure that they're not too low and they're not too high. And you want to speak with a dietitian to figure out how can you definitely correct this issue. The next thing with not skipping meals is to carry a snack. Even though I do not personally have diabetes, I do have hypoglycemia quite often. So in my purse, actually I don't even carry a purse anymore. I carry a backpack with me everywhere because it holds more stuff.
I'm with you on that completely. A snack pack, it's perfect.
Holds more stuff. So I always carry a snack with me, and snacks definitely do the trick if you're not able to eat, if you're not able to stop for a meal. So some snacks that I always have on hand, I call them jelly babies, but you guys may know them as jelly beans. I always have jelly beans on hand to get my blood sugar back up, and also, so that I can keep going and then have a meal. Something else that I find helpful is some type of crackers or even juice. Juice does the trick for me. Another thing is to choose whole grains. So the reason why I love whole grains so much is because they are full of fiber, and fiber as well helps to slow down how quickly blood sugar is how sugar is absorbed into your blood. And then also another thing with that is you want to be careful of your liquid calories. So if you're not having a low blood sugar, but let's say that you want a soda or you want a juice, I would definitely recommend switching to the diet sodas because they do not have any sugar in them. Or if you want something like a juice, to have it as part of a healthy meal. So that meal that you're going to have is going to have that protein, it's going to have the fat, it's going to have the fiber, which will slow down how quickly sugar is absorbed into your body. And also, final tip is to definitely be consistent. And the reason why you want to be consistent, and this is specifically for individuals that may have type 2 diabetes, but it can be applied for individuals that have type 1 diabetes as well, is because your body likes to be regular. It likes to be on a rhythm. It likes to be stable. It likes to be consistent, which can help in blood sugar regulation. So I know I said a mouthful, but the home point is definitely do not skip meals and carry a snack.
I love that you said, I have a juice box here at my desk. We're not walking around having this chat, but I am prepared for low blood sugars at all times. So it's one of those things you don't want to be caught without your jelly beans or your juice box in the moment where you really need it. And then one other thing I wanted to ask was, and again, folks who are in the chat, we see you, we want to hear you too. So if you have any questions for Kim, please make sure you drop those in there because we would love to address them here live during the course of the discussion. But Kim, as you're talking, you're really, I love the way you present things, just as an aside. Like I think the way that you make things feel very accessible and not overwhelming. And that's important for me. I've had type 1 for 34 years. So to hear you talk about food in a calm and reasoned way is doing me some good service right now. And I'm sure it is for people who are listening at home. And what is really helpful for me as a long-term person with diabetes is having concrete examples of what a certain kind of snack would be, or what this exchange would look like in, practical application. So when we're talking about snacks, and you had mentioned earlier about grab a low carb snack if you're, want to honor your hunger, but keep your blood sugars in track. What are some examples of actual low carb snacks that people can grab a pen and jot down the idea for now? Some concrete examples, not concrete, food.
Definitely. We're on the same train of thought, Kerri. So I hope you guys have your pens because these are some tasty things I'm about to tell you guys. So the first one is a stuffed bell pepper with melted cheese on top.
Ooh.
So let's talk about that. So you have your bell pepper. In my mind's eye, I'm envisioning a red bell pepper. You cut the top off, and you can have some ground chicken in there with whatever type of vegetable, and you put your cheese on top. You pop it in the oven for about 20 minutes, and that is an example of a low carb snack idea. Another example, which I personally am a fan of, is an avocado and tuna bowl. And you may be saying, okay, Kim, what does an avocado and tuna bowl look like? So imagine you have a really small avocado. I think it's the Haas avocados. You cut it in half, you take out the pit. So you're left with basically one avocado, but split in two. And then you just put your tuna in the middle of that. And that is your avocado and tuna bowl. It's mostly consists of protein. It has the healthy type of fat coming from the avocado. And there's basically little to no carbs in there. Mm-hmm. So it's not going to bother your blood sugars, because truth be told, there are some times that we want to eat. There are some times that our body is stressed and our blood sugars are just going haywire. So the stuffed bell pepper or the avocado and tuna bowl are great examples. Another thing that I think is really, really fun for kids is a meat and cheese roll-up. So at the grocery stores, how they have the fruit roll-ups, and little children may like these, but this is the savory version of that. So you have like your cold cuts, and you have your cheese, and you just roll it together and you present it to your child or even to yourself. This is finger food. It's fun. It's easy to eat. You have your protein coming from the meat, and you also have your dairy product in there coming from the cheese, and also fat from the cheese as well. Another thing, if you're a person that is more on the sensory side, what I mean sensory, I mean by like crunchy things, is you can make homemade kale chips. It doesn't sound tasty, but let me tell you, it's tasty. I have tried this before, and this is coming from a person that I actually have to hide all my vegetables in my smoothies, but this one is actually pretty tasty. So with homemade kale chips, you just get kale and you cut off that rind, and you rub a little oil on it, a little salt, a little pepper, and you just pop it in the oven on low for about 30 minutes, and it comes out nice and crunchy, and it's basically dehydrated kale, and it tastes just like a potato chip. Doesn't taste bad at all. Another thing is deviled eggs. Eggs are actually, and it's all protein. Something that I personally think goes well with deviled eggs is a little smoked paprika. It just gives the kick, it gives the flavor. You guys see the island coming out in me with the smoked paprika, and it doesn't impact the blood sugars at all. And then finally, and if you guys want me to repeat any of these, just please go ahead and let me know, because when I get excited, I also talk kind of fast. Is carrot and celery sticks with either ranch dressing or hummus.
Okay.
So with the carrot and celery sticks, that's all fiber. You have some vitamin A in there, and it's also nourishing to the system. And ranch dressing has very little carbohydrates, but ranch goes well with a lot of things. I'm a ranch type of person.
Goes with everything, actually.
Or if you do not want the ranch dressing, you can do hummus. So hummus is made from chickpeas, which has the fiber and has protein in there as well. So it actually has the crunch, which is the texture, and it has the taste, which is coming from the chickpeas. So I would say that these snacks, these low carb or carb-free snacks, as you like to call them, are snacks that are really guilt-free, in a sense that they're not going to really bother your blood sugars, especially on the days where you may be sick or you may be stressed out or have a lot to do and your blood sugar reading is just really high throughout the day.
And I love that you, the ones that you have cited, personally, I pictured a yellow bell pepper. I don't know if that makes me weird, but yellow is where I went with that. But was what you had already mentioned is also celiac friendly. And so, because a lot of people who are involved with children with diabetes, a lot of families who are living with kids with diabetes and adults with diabetes, they're also dealing with celiac. As you'd mentioned, there's always that autoimmune tie-in, those free gifts you get sometimes with type 1. But it's so helpful to have ideas for people who are also trying to avoid gluten. So thank you specifically for citing those. But you did bring up one of the magic words, and that is the G word, guilt. And so guilt and food, unfortunately, go as well together as ranch dressing and everything. And so it's good. It would be great to like kind of workshop a little bit how people with diabetes, maybe people in general, can deal with the feelings of guilt that they may have associated with the foods that they're eating. So what's your take on food guilt? No pressure, by the way.
Pressure, none taken. So definitely food guilt, is something that I can totally sympathize and empathize with. I feel like, especially as a dietitian, people are always saying, well, you shouldn't really be eating that as a dietitian. And I can just really imagine, with my patients and clients that come to me, they tell me that their family says you can't have this and you can't have that. But one thing that we need to remember is we need to be kind to ourselves. And this can be done through telling ourselves affirmation and also surrounding ourselves with positive people. So for that person that asked the question earlier about, you being so overwhelmed with your child, your 4-year-old that was diagnosed with celiac disease, I want you to definitely approach this from a positive limelight. And instead of surrounding yourselves with the I can't or my child can't mentality, let's look at, okay, well, what can they have and how can I make this fun? Another thing to focus on is the sensory, is like, the taste and the texture. Focus on the fact that, hey, this food is nourishing my body. It's keeping me alive. Food is something that I eat with my family and my friends, people that I do appreciate, and realize that food is not good and food is not bad. Food just simply exists. And there may be some foods which our bodies cannot tolerate. Like I know me personally, I do have food sensitivities. As much as I would like to eat certain types of nuts, my body just can't tolerate it. So instead of saying, well, I'm going to enter into, like an unsafe mental space, instead I focus on, well, what can I have and how can this be enjoyable to my system? And seeing that I'm not a psychologist, it's something I'm thinking about. Seeing I'm not a psychologist, if the above, anything that I mentioned doesn't help, I definitely do want you to seek more professional help, because it may just be something that is triggering for you and you need to find those triggers in order to better cope. Because food, as leveling as it may be, can definitely be a divide as well. And it can definitely hinder us from our health goals.
Well, I mean, I know you see lots of patients who have diabetes, and you're working through their food choices and their food concerns all in one fell swoop. How would you handle something where people are eating in secret, whether it's eating binge eating sort of thing. I mean, I was diagnosed with type 1 as a small child, and I used to eat all the cookies if I found them. And that did contribute a lot to food guilt. And I know a lot of people who are diagnosed with diabetes as a kid have some similar stories. So in terms of kind of breaking away from that, those feelings of guilt, if you've done it in the past, how can you help shake off that urge to do it in the future?
And this is a really tough question, to be honest with you, Kerri. So, how can we definitely break off those habits? So, to be honest with you, even if you are someone that does have diabetes, or even if you do have a child that does have diabetes, I want you to be kind. I know, many times when, you eat the extra cookie and your blood sugar levels spike high, and then you may get in trouble or may get reprimanded about it.
Mm-hmm.
I want us to be understanding that, there are going to be some hiccups in our cycle. We're not perfect human beings, but with those hiccups is also an area for us to expand, to learn, to grow, how there are certain foods that can be more nourishing to the system and control our blood sugar levels just a little bit more. And also to just realize, hey, sometimes you're going to have that craving for that chocolate chip cookie. I mean, I had that craving a couple minutes before I entered into, the conversations with you. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something that we need to teach ourselves and to teach our children, because food is labeled as this is good for you, this is bad for you, you can't and you can. But to realize, you need to be definitely forgiving to yourself, and also to work through your growing pains, because that's exactly what it is. Mm-hmm. It's a growing pain, and with more information about food and how it can affect us, then we can, make better decisions about it. So I hope that answered your question.
It does, but it also opens up a slightly different discussion too about having an empathetic and compassionate clinician on your side, which clearly you are, and your patients, I'm sure, benefit from the fact that you are willing to have the real conversations with them instead of just the, well, do as I say sort of thing. It's very helpful for people with diabetes to have a clinician who understands that this is a journey and not so cut and dried. So props to you for being that kind of clinician that more people with diabetes would benefit from seeing. And we do have a question in the Q&A that's up here, and it's talking about snack times that vary due to work. And it seems like we've got somebody who's teaching music students and is in a school system and is looking for something that they can eat COVID-wise that keeps them both able to readily remove their mask or eat discreetly underneath their mask. Do you have any, I know that's kind of a very niche sort of thing, but for people who are trying to snack responsibly during COVID, do you have any suggestions on that, or have you come across?
Sure. So snacking responsibly. Sorry.
Responsibly, but feel free to use whatever works for you. It's just like COVID cravings.
I personally carry with me are these peanut. You ever seen those little packages? They have, I think, 6 in a package. It's not 8. I think it's 6 in a package. And they're these little peanut butter whole grain crackers, and they're ready in the package, and they're pre-made for you, and you just pick them up at the grocery store and you just stuff it in your bag.
I had some in here just a few minutes ago. At camp, we used to call them nabs. They were peanut butter and cracker, like little sandwiches, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
Exactly. And the reason why I think that is a great snack is, number one, it has that peanut butter, which has that healthy fat in there. And another thing about it too, it has that whole grain cracker. So you're actually getting the fat from the peanut butter, the protein from the peanut butter, and your carb from that cracker. And I know I do it too during the COVID-19. I have my mask and I just take one and I pop it in my mouth, put back my mask, and no one can tell that I'm actually eating anything because the mask is hiding. And another thing about that peanut butter cracker as well, it's going to hold you over because the peanut butter has that healthy fat in there, which helps to slow down not only the absorption of the carbohydrate, but it helps to hold your hunger. So I think that is a great snack. Other snack ideas, which you can do as well, is some type of meat and cheese and bread sandwich. And what I like to do, you just chop it up into 4 squares, and you just take one of those squares, you put it in your mouth, you put the mask back on, and you just snack that manner as well. So that is something. The peanut butter is actually a little more versatile because it's more shelf stable than the sandwich, but those are 2 options. And I know they said that they also had fruit fruit is a great option as well to hold you over. I think the problem with fruit, it does have the vitamins and minerals, don't get me wrong, but if you can somehow bite it and then put your mask back on, and you don't want to be touching your fruit and your hands and your mask so often, but those peanut butter crackers really go a long way. They do.
And yeah, I mean, COVID adds a complexity to being able to eat on the fly. And so I love that that question came through, because that is something people who are back at school in more public settings, I mean, that could apply to kids too, if they need to eat in the classroom sort of thing like that. Not that I know what's going on in the classroom, because I'm not a teacher for 100 different reasons, but I know that people are jumping through a bunch of different hurdles to make it work and keep everybody safe. So I love that recommendation. And again, reminding everybody at home, if you have questions, throw them in the chat. We love to hear from people who are listening at home. But Kim, I do have another question for you about cultural sensitivity and discussions around food. And it's the things that I eat in my home are different from the things that my colleagues eat in their home. And we are raised to talk about food and feel about food in different ways. And so I feel like that is often a missing element to discussions, both around diabetes and around people in general. And sometimes diabetes directly impacts what people used to eat culturally, but now feel as though they either can't or are not sure how to reintegrate that. So jumping into that very, very broad sort of topic, how would you sort of address food and cultural sensitivity?
This is a great question. And, I always tell this story. I have two colleagues, and both of these colleagues are dietitians, but they're in Canada, but they told me two impactful stories that I can never forget. So the first story is actually from a colleague of mine. She's Chinese and both her parents have diabetes. And before she became a dietitian, a provider was telling them, well, you need to eat more salads, more raw vegetables. And her parents actually went home and did not adhere to this recommendation, because in her particular household, I don't want to say the Chinese culture, because again, that's a broad generalization and I want to stay away from that. But in her particular household, her family and extended family didn't eat raw vegetables. That's just something that they did not do. And then the other example is a friend of mine whose father is originally from Africa, and he was consuming a food that had a very it was made from corn, and I guess the provider found out that the corn was causing his blood sugars to go all over the place. So the provider recommended, hey, let's switch out the corn for asparagus. And this is a man, 50 something years old, that had never had asparagus in his life. And she was saying, well, that was inefficient. So I think, being definitely cultural sensitive is important, because, something that I try to do as a healthcare provider, instead of my clients or my patients getting to know what is allowed on their diet, I instead reverse roles. I instead take the role of a learner and have my patients or clients at our first encounter be the teacher. And hey, teach me about you. What is your culture? What are their restrictions? Is there any religious restrictions I should be aware of? Is there any certain time that you eat food? Does your culture snack throughout the day? What is your culture like? So I think, for us, for individuals that are speaking to people that do have diabetes, we need to know their culture. We need to know what goes on in their household. We need to know, what foods are and are not accessible to them. And something that I like to say is, it doesn't matter, and I'm saying this a lot now, it doesn't matter if we're Democrat or we're Republican. We all need to eat, and we all need to eat to stay alive, and we all need to eat for our health, and we all need to eat in order so that, our blood sugars and our health outcomes are definitely the best. And the way that I do this, and the way that I definitely encourage other people to do this, especially diabetes educators, is to educate ourselves on different people. Something that I like to do, I actually become friends with all my patients and all my clients. Like, hey, it's not just a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday job. It's about, well, what are you having in your household? Are you having the liver? What does the liver taste like? How is it cooked? Oh, you would like me to come over to your household? Okay, can we meet at a restaurant? Tell me yourself. So I really think it would behoove us to avail ourselves to know who our client is, instead of just looking at their diagnosis, looking at their medical record, looking at the medications they take, looking at how long they have had diabetes. Like, I heard one dietitian say it marvelously. She said, We don't call people that have cancer cancerous. We call them people that have cancer, just like how we don't call people that have diabetes diabetics. We call them individuals with diabetes. Diabetes, cancer is not the definitive term. That doesn't define you. It is just something that you may have. So I think it really, when it's regarding cultural sensitivity, we need to come from it from a perspective of, let's get to know that individual first. It doesn't matter if they're Black, if they're white, everyone does something a little different. And what is their defining culture? So that's how I see everything.
And so as wearing more of the patient hat. So if I'm a patient who's working with a clinician, and a lot of people can't, I feel like when people say, well, my clinician doesn't do this, or I don't have that kind of relationship with my clinician, it's not just as easy as dropping the clinician and finding a new one, because that you have to have access to a different clinician. Your insurance has to cover that person. So it's not, that breakup is tough, and finding a new relationship can be even tougher, especially now. And so for people with diabetes like me, who have access to a dietitian, what if my dietitian is not as open to these conversations? What way can I, as a patient and a person living with diabetes, bring my culture to my clinician? Is there a good way to sort of break the ice in that discussion?
Yes, there is a great way to break the ice. And I'm glad that you used that analogy, because it just brought another picture to my mind. I'm such a
great.
So when we look at culture, whether that's your culture, Kerri, or my culture, we're only seeing as clinicians 10, like an iceberg, you only see 10% of that iceberg. But the vast majority of the iceberg, the more important parts, that 90% lives underwater. So something that I would definitely say, and this is what I personally say to my providers, and I've recently had to have this conversation, I politely say, I don't think you're understanding where I'm coming from. And I would like you to hear me out, because I need you to understand this and this and this is what's going on. You're just seeing a number. You're it's not the root cause analysis. So definitely taking that humble mode and saying, well, I need you to understand this, and I would like you to hear me out. I would like you to understand my perspective. It's a hard conversation to call out a healthcare provider, but be empowered, because realize that you guys don't work for healthcare providers. I don't work for my doctor. My doctor works for me. That's what my health insurance is paying my doctor for. So it's really about having those tough conversations, and also being very tenacious and very persistent in a respectable manner to let them know this is what's going on. A friend of mine told me a story, I think it was 2 nights ago. There was this lady that went to her healthcare provider, and she was saying, well, I'm feeling sick. I'm not feeling really good. And all the doctor had to say is, well, you need to lose weight. Just continue to lose weight and you'll be fine. Until she kept going back time and time and time again and saying, well, how about we run this test? How about we run this lab? And so, the doctor would ask, well, what's your reasoning for that? And she was able to back up her reasoning. And lo and behold, she had cancer. The doctor. Oh my gosh. I know this is like the worst case scenario here.
No, but that's just so dramatic.
It's dramatic, but it all was because of her tenacity. But I need you to listen to me. I live within my body. I know how I'm feeling. The way that I'm feeling, I can't translate that for you. You would never feel what I'm feeling, because I've been in my body for all this time. And even if it's your child, for the parents out there, even if it's your child that does have diabetes or does have celiac disease, you are an advocate for your child, because your child may not be able to say in certain terms, mommy, daddy, this is what I'm feeling, but your child's behavior, how your child responds to certain things. And it's really about being an advocate, and also saying, well, I need you to listen to me. I have gotten to know you, and I would like for that same respect to be reciprocated. And honestly, some clients have done this to me when I was new in my career, and it's very humbling, and it makes you a more active listener.
I like being called out. I feel like it helps me see things that I'm not seeing. So I like opening up a conversation like that with a clinician too. And especially when it comes to talking about food, it can be very embarrassing to admit to a dietitian or a healthcare provider, the things that you know that you need to work on. That vulnerability is difficult to kind of cultivate that relationship with a clinician before you can say, well, here's where I'm really screwing things up, or here's where I'm really struggling. And so I like the idea that there's vulnerability on both sides and like openness to a discussion. We're kind of closing out things. We've got about 15 minutes left to go, and I don't have any other open questions at the moment. But in terms of kind of addressing people who may be newly diagnosed with diabetes, we'll take a newly diagnosed, then we'll kind of go with they've had diabetes for a long time. For folks who are newly diagnosed with, more specifically, like people who are using insulin. So what kind of thing do you wish that they would hear from their dietitian the first time they sit down with them post-diagnosis? What would be like the dream pearls that could be dropped for those people that could help shape the way they see food? Oh, sorry.
My mind is
like what I wish my dietitian told me sort of thing.
The first thing that I would love all dietitians to say to their patients or their clients that are diagnosed with type 1 diabetes is that this is not a death sentence. Mm-hmm. Many times I feel that we say, well, if you don't control your blood sugars, then, you may get a leg amputation, or you may go blind, or you may get kidney disease, again, focusing on the negativity aspect of it. So that, when they do start taking their insulin and monitoring their blood sugar levels, and they see, well, my blood sugars are out the parameter, or my A1C is really high. Does that mean that I'm doing something bad? And then they internalize that intrinsic that they're bad because their blood sugars aren't up to par. But instead, come at it from a more positive perspective and realize that within the first few years of your diagnosis of diabetes, that you're going to have some rocky roads, but really it's a matter of the turtle and the hare. Like we all know the story, the turtle wins at the end. So it's a slow and steady process, and realize that your numbers aren't going to look good because your body is just trying to get itself into some type of homeostasis. So it's really about being forgiving of your blood sugar fluctuations and realizing within yourself, like, hey, you know what? I'm going to give myself a pat on the back. I did pretty good today with eating three meals, and I had snacks, and they were nourishing to my body, and they were nutrient rich. And hey, when I wanted that cookie, but hey, I had that cookie with a meal that had fat, protein, and carbohydrate. So that is something that I would say to someone who is newly diagnosed. And then with time, with your body being able to stabilize itself a little better, then I would move into more of this is the nutrition therapy. This is the foods that can impact your blood sugars, and this is how you make informed choices. So it's really not about the dietitian being the food police, and because a lot of people think that dietitians are the food police, and monitoring what you eat, but being also an informed consumer about, well, I know if I eat this 1/2 of a banana that, my neighbor has type 1 diabetes also, and their blood sugar levels are fine, but mine goes haywire. And why does mine go haywire? My numbers are supposed to be good, but being, forgiving yourself and realizing that everyone lives in different bodies and different foods impact people differently. So that is the new diagnosis. And for someone that has had diabetes for a long time, something that I can definitely say is, one thing that I would definitely love for everyone to know is, realize what foods impact your blood sugars a little more than others. And also with that as well, that does not mean because carbohydrates impact your blood sugars that you should avoid all carbohydrates. No, because our body does need certain carbohydrates for the B vitamins, and so that our cells can repair and reproduce and grow effectively and efficiently. But just know what foods do impact your body, and also to make health conscious decisions. So for instance, there's going to be some times where for breakfast, you just want coffee and you just want a donut. Hey,
are you in my house? Okay.
Hey, that's A-okay. But for lunchtime now, then I would want us to make a more cognitive or more health conscious decision, because there are going to be some puddles in the road that we're going to have to step through. But definitely realize, as you said more eloquently, Kerri, it's a journey. It's a marathon. It's not a 100-meter dash. This is a marathon that we're definitely, all in the race with. And realize too, that you're the bus driver. Realize the doctor doctor's not the bus driver, the dietitian is not the bus driver. You're the bus driver and you're driving your team behind you. So you're steering the direction of how your health is going to go.
I love, and I can also control who gets on and off that bus. So I'll take that analogy and I'll ride it all the way through. And actually going from newly diagnosed to long timer, we do have a question from Karen who is, she says she's a long timer in the chat. She's saying, as a long timer who has figured out what works for blood sugar, but it does not fulfill the recommended normal dietary mixture, what should be prioritized? The food that's eaten versus A1C?
So, Karen, this is a great question because some endocrinologists that I have spoken to do not trust the A1C.
Mm-hmm.
So, something that I would like to know is, what is your endocrinologist, your primary care provider? What are they looking at? Are they taking that A1C? Because the A1C has its flaws as well. Truth be told, there's limitations to it. So something that I would say, Karen, seeing that you're a long timer, is definitely the food mixture, making sure that you're getting all food groups. And the reason for that, when we do not get all food groups, we're missing out on certain vitamins and certain minerals that make our bodies go, that prevent us from getting any type of nutrient deficiency. And I know living within the United States or wherever you're listening, whether it's an industrial society that you're living in, food deficiencies they're not pretty at all. They're really, really scary. Mm-hmm. So it really depends on your healthcare provider, but something that I like to tell my patients is making sure that we're getting that proper mixture and that we're not overdoing it with the amount of carbs. And that's why earlier we mentioned like, oh yeah, these are the low carb items that we would like to adhere to. So that's something that I would focus on. So I'm curious to know what your healthcare provider and what your dietitian is focusing on. But, and also if you have a question about that, that's something too that you should approach them with. But like, well, the A1C has its limitations. And I understand if I do get my A1C below a certain number, that does have good outcomes for mm-hmm. me, but it's not within my, the recommended normal dietary mixture. So it's really individualized at this perspective, because age individualizes things, gender, the amount of stress that you get individualizes things, the amount of sleep, lack of sleep increases blood sugar levels, believe it or not. So it's really looking at it from a more holistic perspective, mm-hmm. and not just you're a machine that has a number. I really don't like to look at that as solely as my main diagnostic when speaking with my patients. They're more than just a machine that has a number. There's a whole lifestyle behind it.
No, that is absolutely true. And sitting here and talking to you is making me think about how infrequently, as an adult with type 1 who's had type 1 for over 30 years, how infrequently I'm referred to a dietitian. Now, the few times that I've been referred to a dietitian were at diagnosis at the age of 7, mm-hmm. around the time when I went through puberty, and definitively during both of my pregnancies. But there are a lot of deserts of information in between there. And so regardless of how long someone's had diabetes, how often do you think it's important for a person with diabetes or a family with diabetes to sit with a dietitian and get a little bit of a rework?
So I was actually looking at the comment section. Karen, you're funny. Dietitian, why are you here?
Yeah.
So this is a great question. And you're right. I feel the only time that I see patients in my practice that have diabetes is when their diabetes is uncontrolled. Mm-hmm. With the exception of one particular patient who she realizes that her doctor works for her. She does not work for her doctor.
She's the bus driver.
The bus driver.
Mm-hmm.
So she actually comes to see me every 6 months because that is what her health insurance pays for. Mm-hmm. Every 6 months. And then every 6 months, she gets her A1C checked. So then I'm able to say, this is what we're tweaking because this is the goal that you have set out, you have agreed with your primary care provider. So I think the main thing is we need to see what your healthcare covers in regards to seeing a dietitian. Some healthcare only covers a visit once a year. Some healthcare visit covers twice a year visits. Some healthcare actually covers quarterly visits. It all depends. Again, I'm in the state of Florida, and I know depending on what state you are, things may be a little different, but I would say definitely twice a year. Mm-hmm. I would say twice a year. As you get your A1C checked, and if it changes drastically, then twice a year. But if it's stable, then once a year.
And so it's a matter of doing kind of a self-assessment as a person with diabetes and seeing what you feel you need. But I just feel like a dietitian is such a great tool in the diabetes management toolbox that a lot of people are not encouraged to take advantage of. So I'm just thrilled that you were here today to help re-inspire people to make sure that they are seeing a dietitian as needed and to have these checkpoints to make sure that their goals are being met with their team.
Right.
I think that's very powerful.
And I love the fact that you said team, because the dietitian is a part of that team. And as you said, definitely underutilized.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we've got just a couple of minutes. So I'm going to have to close out in a second, but is there anything that you wanted to add, or something that we haven't addressed yet that you wanted to make sure you threw out there as we close out today's chat?
I think we addressed everything. And then one thing I wanted to say, take home point to definitely empower everyone listening, is to ask questions and continue to ask questions from your provider. If you ask a question and you're not satisfied with that question, ask the question again. And if you see that they're getting frustrated with you, gently call them out. Don't hesitate. And I mean, definitely do this with all respect, but don't hesitate, because this is what you're paying your providers to do. And I want to empower you guys. Don't be alarmed by the white coat syndrome. Don't. This is your health. This is your life.
I think that's extremely important. And also, I want people to be able to find you after this chat is over. So once the chat ends, we'll have a recording that is published live either to the Children with Diabetes website tonight or tomorrow morning. So this will be archived and shared with people who weren't able to sit and join us live. But where can folks find you who are looking for your insight outside of this chat?
Sure. So you can find me on my website, Kim Rose Dietitian. That's KIMROSE. DIETITIAN.com, KimRoseDietitian.com. And if you guys have any questions that you want to personally ask me, my website has a contact section, so you can put your questions there and I'll be sure to get back to you.
And we did have one quick question. We had someone in the Q&A asking if you work with patients outside of Florida.
At this time, it depends what state you're in, to be honest with you, because certain states have certain regulations that allow dietitians to cross state lines. So I would really encourage you to go on my website, let me know what state you're in, and I will be able to tell you if to cross the state guidelines in order to better serve you. Gotcha.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And for folks at home, if you have other questions, you can always email those to info@childrenwithdiabetes.com. And we have our diabetes care team who is on staff to help address any needs that you have. But just to be like kind of fangirl a tiny bit here, Kim, you have been fantastic. And I am thrilled that you were able to join us today. You have made a very daily topic that can be very intimidating feel a lot easier to think about, talk about, and ask questions about. So thank you so much for being generous with your time and with your expertise with our audience here today. You are just awesome. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. I appreciate your kind words.
No worries. And for everybody at home, we'll be closing out the chat for the day, but thank you all for joining us so much. And you'll be able to catch this archive chat at cwd.is/Screenside, where we'll have our upcoming chats as well. And we'll join you again in 2 weeks for our next Screenside chat. But thanks everybody for joining us. Kim, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. And we'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.